Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Tracy.
And my name is Melissa, and we are so glad you're joining us for today's episode. Our guest today is Ginger Darval, a retired nurse and boomerang third culture kid who spent her growing up years in Ecuador, returned to the U.S., and then went abroad again after she was married, hence the boomerang. She finally moved back to the U.S. in the 1980s, where she continued to work as a nurse and raise her 3 children. In this episode, Ginger tells us stories of what it was like growing up in the 1960s as part of a missionary community in Quito, Ecuador, where Ginger and her siblings were part of a close-knit group who saw each other through trauma and, at the same time, possibility. So buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright positions as part 1 of Ginger's round trip story gets ready for takeoff.
We are here with our special guest, Ginger Darval. And Ginger is somebody that I met 8 years ago when I first moved back. I had her granddaughter in my 8th grade class. We are so privileged to have her here on our podcast. Welcome, Ginger.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I can't wait to hear your stories that you're going to share with us. And just so you all know, Ginger's stories and interviews, these 2 episodes, are actually part of a little bit of a special treat because we are also going to be interviewing her husband, Dave, in a separate set of interviews and episodes. So you're going to get to hear both of the spouses' stories. So that's going to be really fun. This will be the first time that we've done that.
So it's going to be a 4-part series.
Yeah. So as we get started, Ginger, the first thing we like to do is just touch on a little bit of what we call the backstory. Start by telling us about yourself and your family, and that can be, your current immediate family as well as your family growing up.
Well, my family right now is my husband, Dave, and then I have 3 grown children. My daughter lives in Fresno with her 3 girls, and then my 2 sons live in Seattle. And growing up, my parents were both from southern Wisconsin, and I was the oldest of 3. It was me and then my sister and my brother.
Okay. And how long have you and Dave been married?
Almost 50 years.
Congratulations.
In October, it'll be 50 years.
Oh,
Yeah.
so by the time we put out this episode, it will be 50 years.
Yeah.
That is exciting.
What a milestone. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You are what we have decided we're calling a boomerang TCK because you actually were a TCK when you were growing up and then you moved again abroad later in your life. So give us kind of the flyby overview of where you lived abroad and then where you went.
Okay. So, yes, I was born in Minnesota. And then when I was 5, we went to Ecuador, came back 2 times for furloughs when I was in 4th grade and 8th grade,
Mm-hmm.
and then came back when I graduated from high school and went to college in Chicago, and then moved to San Diego where I met Dave. And let's see, probably a couple years after we were married, we went to Saudi Arabia for him to work there. Then we came back to the States and then eventually joined Mission Aviation Fellowship and went to Costa Rica for further language school and then to Colombia as missionaries. In 88 or so, came back to the U.S., and we've lived in the U.S. since then.
Got it. So you said you've been here in the States since 88. Tell us about what you did when you came back.
So we lived in Redlands, California for another year or so, and I worked at a hospital down there. Then we moved to Fresno. And I worked in home health nursing and hospice nursing, and
Hmm.
then went to the Poverello House, which
Oh,
was
yeah.
a free clinic for people who didn't have insurance. And then I retired from there.
Okay, so then you're a nurse by trade and your husband is a pilot.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And everything else. A grandmother, a mother, a daughter, everything else.
Right, right.
Well, now we'd like to get into some stories about the first part of your life, and then Dave will talk about the time abroad when the boomerang goes back. That's how we'll organize these episodes. So tell us about what you remember about your initial transition and adjustment when your family moved to Ecuador.
I was 5 when we went to Ecuador. I don't even remember going, but I just remember being there. And our first house was kind of far away from the hub of the mission and the compound. And so that was a little bit difficult, but soon we were able to move onto the compound where they had a few houses. And my dad was in charge of the laboratory at the mission hospital. So he was on call at night and weekends and everything. So it was much better for us to be real close to the hospital. And then living on the compound, it was all fenced in. So my parents felt quite safe in letting us just um, hang out as long as we were inside the fence. We could kind of
Hmm.
do whatever we wanted to do. And there were lots of other kids around. The nursery school was there. And then the school that was the Alliance Academy where I went, which was first through 12th grade, that was right next door to the compound, so that was very close too. So it was all kinda right there. That made it nice.
Was your dad a physician?
No, he was a medical technologist,
Oh,
and
okay.
that was the reason they had been looking into missions. The mission that we went with, HCJB, which is now called Reach Beyond, they had a hospital besides a shortwave broadcasting station. And they were just looking to open the hospital, and they needed somebody to run the laboratory, so he went down to do that.
I've heard that a lot of faith-based organizations establish hospitals all over the world, or and historically they
Right,
have.
right. Yes, yes. And then my mother helped him also in the lab. He just kind of trained her to do some of the things, and then she also helped with the, newborn babies and moms in the hospital,
Mm.
which she really enjoyed.
And what city were you in?
We were in Quito, the capital.
Oh, okay.
High in the mountains. I think it's 9,000 something feet. Lots of mountains and snow caps. Very beautiful.
We know that things are really amazing overseas, and we also know that things are hard. So please tell us one of your hard stories.
Well, I think it was a little hard to adjust when we first got there, especially like with some of the foods. Uh, the peas, even though you cooked them, they were like little bullets, so they didn't taste very good. And the meat was very tough and gristly, and I did not like to eat it at all, and I would try to hide it under my plate or feed it to the dog if we had one, kinda sneak him a piece so that I didn't have to eat my meat. But there was also a lot of good food like the fried plantains and
Mhm.
rice and basically what was like homemade potato chips and banana chips, which always had salt on them, never sugar.
Mhm.
Another thing that was hard, and this is fast forwarding to actually my senior year in high school, the seniors always did a trip and got a few days off school. And so we decided to take our trip to the coast, a town called Salinas, which now is really built up, but back then there wasn't a whole lot there. And so we all took the bus down there with our sponsor, Mr. Landers, and his wife. And we checked into the hotel. And I think it was probably the next day we decided to go out to the beach called Mar Bravo because it had really big, like spectacular waves, but it was very dangerous. And they warned us to, be really careful and not go in too far. And the waves made me kind of nervous. I like barely stuck my toe in. And so I was just enjoying the waves and walking on the beach, but some of the kids went in, and one of the boys, Jimmy, in our class, he was kind of smaller and he had never been to the ocean before. And so he was very excited. And I think he was trying to be careful, but then he got out a little ways and pretty soon he was struggling in the water, and our sponsor, Mr. Landers, was kind of near him, and then one of the other guys, so they could see that he was struggling, and they went and I think they, almost, like, got a hold of his swimsuit, and then a big wave came, and it swept Jimmy out into the ocean, and it swept them in towards the shore, and they tried to go out again, and some of the other boys tried to go out too, but, they never could get to him. And the beach was really isolated, with just, like, a few other people around, but there wasn't anybody to call for help. And then somebody remembered that there was a military base near there, so some of the guys, got in the car or the bus and went over there to ask for help, and finally, it was maybe an hour later, they sent a helicopter to kinda look and see if they could see anything, but by then it was too late, and, Jimmy was gone, and they never found his body.
Wow.
So, that was very hard for all of us. We were all just, kind of sitting at the beach and praying and crying and, you know, kinda like what to do, and then our poor sponsors felt very responsible for the whole thing. So,
Yeah.
that was really difficult for them. So, eventually, we had to go back to the hotel, and then, they had phones in Ecuador. So this was 1968. They had phones, but you pretty much never called long distance because the
Mhm.
connections weren't that great and it was too expensive, but they had to let people in Quito know. And so Mrs. Landers ended up calling the president of the mission. The connection was really bad, and the only phone was, like, in the lobby of the hotel, so we kids were kind of around there, and here Mrs. Landers is, like, yelling into the phone what had happened, and it was just
Yeah.
awful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we ended up staying and not cutting our trip short, which I think was a good decision because then since we had all experienced that together, we were able
Mhm.
to kind of talk through it and support each other as
Mhm.
best we could. And then when we did go back, then we, met all the other students and Jimmy's family, his parents and his sister. And so that was kind of another thing to have to go through it with everybody else. And the school had a memorial service for him, and we dedicated the yearbook to him. But
Mhm.
in those days, they didn't have psychologists or counselors or anything like that, so we really just had to kind of rely on each other and some of the adults down there to, kinda talk things through, and yeah, so that was very difficult.
I was thinking that losing a child, losing somebody's life in an organization is one of the worst things that can happen, and the whole community mourns it.
Yes.
It's just a ripple effect, especially in a tight-knit, small community.
Yes,
Um,
yes, for sure.
how many were in your class?
We had 23 in our class.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So and that was a big class, but, not compared to the US schools, which, may have several hundred. So we were all pretty close.
Yeah.
Yes, and you had gone to school together and lived in Ecuador all these years.
Yes,
Mm.
yes, some people in and out, but yeah, a lot of us, we had known each other from, 1st or 2nd grade.
I'm glad that you mentioned the lack of mental health caregivers at that point, right? And
Right,
I think that we were talking offline the other day about how nowadays there's a lot more of support. We call it what is it?
Member care.
Member
yes,
care.
that's it.
Yeah, member
Yes,
care. I appreciated receiving member care personally. I know that there are emergency response teams. My experience is in international schools, and ours was kind of a hybrid, right? Christian international school. So we had an emergency response team. There was a larger organization, it's called AirCos, and they also have embedded like committees to deal with abuse or complaints of harassment, things like that, that perhaps in the US we have in our systems.
right, right. Yeah, yeah.
You had mentioned that your friend wrote a book.
Yes, she did. She and another friend wrote "Recovering from Traumatic Stress: A Guide for Missionaries." It's by Stephanie Lanham and Joyce Pelletier. And I texted her today, and she said it is still available from Amazon.
Oh, okay.
Good.
So, yeah. So I found that book helpful.
Yes, and, Ginger, you also mentioned that the parents ended up leaving and going back to the States. We know that sometimes tragedies force us to go home, and that's why some people might be returning, and it's such a hard return.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yes.
so
Yes.
we we hope that if there are people listening who have returned because of a tragedy, that they're able to access support either through their mission organization or sponsoring organization, or able to find counseling. I know that there are some supports that we can also include in the show notes for people who need that support if they're coming home in a traumatic situation.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Very, very important to get that help.
Mhm.
Okay, it's hard to make the transition from this tragedy to something that was lovely, but I'll go ahead and do it. Could you please tell us a story about something you loved?
Yes. Yes. I can do that. I think it was after my sophomore year, they offered a candy striper program at the hospital, and it was a 8-week full-time course and including working, basically to see if you were interested in mostly being a nurse, but maybe also being in the medical profession of some sort of job or other. And so my friend and I were able to do that one summer, and we both really enjoyed it and both ended up becoming nurses. We got to do a lot of things that you wouldn't get to do in the States. They taught us how to make beds. They taught us how to feed patients. That was back in the day of glass syringes and reused syringes and needles. So we would wash and clean the syringes and wash the needles and sharpen the needles and then pack them up in the um, packages to go in the autoclave. We'd also fold gauze for bandages, things like that. And then we got to see 2 surgeries and 2 deliveries. and then just
Wow.
help out a lot with the patients. So, yeah, we both really enjoyed it, and then we were able to work here and there and actually get paid a little bit for it at the hospital sometimes when they needed us. So, yeah, that was fun and fulfilling and made me decide for sure that I wanted to be a nurse.
Oh, I love that. I love how you also said that you got to do things that you wouldn't be able to do in the States.
Right. Right.
And I
Yeah.
isn't that
Yeah.
the case when we're overseas?
Yes.
Sometimes we're doing
Yes.
things that
Yes.
we would not be able to do in our home country.
Right, right. And one other thing that just comes to mind, and this was when I was in elementary school, one of the missionaries who was helping with the programming on the radio station decided to write a program for children. So there was a program called Gospel Bells, and every Saturday morning, all the elementary school kids would gather in the studio and we would practice a couple songs, and then we would sing them on the program and they would have speaking parts. So we just had a great time doing that and being on the radio every week, which didn't really seem like any big deal to us, but that's probably something we would not have been able to do in the US either.
Right. That's fun.
Yeah.
Were,
Yeah.
were you doing this in Spanish?
No, no, it was in English going to the US and other English speaking countries.
What was the focus audience of the other programming for the radio station?
It was actually doing broadcasting to the world, and they had, I think, 7 or 8 different languages that they had missionaries there that spoke those languages. And so they would do programs in Russian, Swedish, Portuguese, and then also Spanish. But they would aim the towers to, hit certain countries.
And that was part of the worldwide shortwave broadcasting station
Right.
that the mission had.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. That is fascinating.
Yeah, there was a Russian family, there was a German family, uh, a Swedish family. Yeah, Japanese.
But they were there specifically for the radio station,
Yes. Yes,
right?
exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
It's amazing to think that they would come and live in Ecuador so that they could be part of a radio ministry. But radio ministry, especially then, could reach people more broadly than individuals could. Just
Correct, correct, and
so,
yes, and some that, like, say, in Russia, where, they wouldn't allow any missionaries, they were
right,
able to listen on the radio. Nowadays, with computers and everything, it's a whole different thing, but that was,
right.
yeah, the kind of the new way to do it back then.
When we were doing our TCK series, one of the questions that we would always ask was, is there anything that, we only know what we know when we know it. But looking back, is there anything that you wish your parents would have known when you guys were kids, when you were growing up there in Ecuador?
Um, Not necessarily. I felt like I was very fortunate to have supportive parents. Also fortunate that they lived in Quito so that I never had to stay in the dorm for a long period of
Mm,
time. So,
mhm.
yeah, I felt very lucky that I could always, go home and talk to them about my problems and get help with my homework and all that kind of things. I felt like probably our circumstances and then just the personalities of my parents, I thought they did well.
Yeah, that's good. Do you have any stories about when you would go back on furloughs and visiting the States?
Yeah. So when I was in 4th grade, the adjustment wasn't too hard, and we ended up living in Ann Arbor, Michigan. so my dad could work at the university lab there and kind of get updated on some things. We lived in this apartment complex for the university um, students and families, so that was a little bit different, and went to a public school there, but the school was nice, and I had a really great teacher in 4th grade. I was pretty shy, and I do remember and this was in the apartment complex, there were lots of kids, and so I made friends with these 2 girls, and one of them was Jewish and one of them was Catholic, and then I was Protestant, so that was kind of interesting, but I remember at school, another girl was asking me, "Well, what religion are you?" And I kinda said, "Well, I don't know." And she said, "Well, like, are you Protestant or Jewish or Catholic?" And I said, "Well, I know I'm not Catholic," because there were a lot of Catholics in Ecuador, so I knew I wasn't that. And she said, "Well, are you Jewish?" I said, "Well, I don't know." And she said, "Well, they don't believe in Jesus." I said, "Well, then I'm not Jewish." She said, "Okay, you must be Protestant." But I guess I just hadn't heard that word before.
How
So,
funny.
and then when I was in 8th grade, that was really hard to come back during junior high, and I went to a public
Yeah.
school, and it was kind of a tough school, so you had to sort of be careful about what you did and didn't do, and it was a very big school, so that was pretty scary, and I couldn't wait to get back to Ecuador, after that year. But the thing that really helped, so my sister's 2 years younger than I am, and we were both avid readers, and we were, staying with my grandma, and down the street, a bookmobile would come every 2 weeks, and you could take out 4 books, and so my sister and I
Mm.
would go, and we would each take out 4 books, and then by the time the bookmobile came back, we had for sure read our own 4 books and maybe the other 4 books of our sister,
Uh-huh.
so
That's really
we read a
fun.
lot.
When you would go back for your furloughs, how long were you there? Was it for a whole
It
school
was
year?
pretty much for a whole school year.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a long.
So, and most of the time, we were excited to go back. We were excited to get the foods that we couldn't get in Ecuador, like root beer and licorice and some of the other candy and that kind of thing, and
Mhm.
see the relatives, and then we would have been ready to go back
Yeah.
because Quito was home.
So, what would you say, Ginger, that you learned about yourself as a result of your time living abroad when you were growing up?
Well, I think I learned that I enjoyed traveling to other countries,
Mm.
speaking another language, learning about a different culture, and getting to know those people. There were kids that when I came back on furlough to Wisconsin, and this was southern Wisconsin, an hour or 2 from Chicago. Some of them hadn't even been across the border to, Illinois or certainly not Chicago, and it's like, "Oh, that just seems so boring just to stay in one place all the time." For us, it was exciting to travel, and then even when we came on furlough to move back to the States for a while, we didn't always like everything, but and then go back and yeah, it was just a lot of fun. Seems like more of an adventure, and then I think, just learning that there's many ways to look at the world and a lot of different things to see and learn about, and then different people to get to know, but yet, you know, sort of at our core, the people are all the same.
Mm, mhm.
A lot of our guests say that. We talk about at our core, we are the same. We want the same things. And it's
Mhm.
really beautiful to hear that theme come up again and again, because that helps us to be empathetic and realize that we, as other people have said, we have more in common than we have differences.
Correct. Yes. Yes, for sure.
Thank you, Ginger, for sharing your round trip stories from Ecuador. From a tragedy on a school trip to intern nursing work in the missionary hospital, you shared experiences that connected you to your people and future profession. You had an ideal situation with your tight-knit school community, all while getting to live at home. And you witnessed and participated in the work of a holistic ministry, which included a hospital and a worldwide shortwave radio station. Indeed, you got to do things that you would never have been able to do if you had lived in the U.S. So, what happened when Ginger returned to the United States? You'll have to make a return trip to our podcast for part 2 of Ginger's round trip story.
Want the podcast equivalent of early boarding and first class seating? Be sure to subscribe to this podcast in your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, would you consider sharing it with your fellow globe-trotting friends? We would love to encourage them too. We believe that sharing stories helps our understanding of the world grow larger while the distance between us grows smaller.
As this episode lands, we hope these stories have encouraged you, helped you find some more of your belongings, and made your baggage a little lighter. Thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you next time.